We got Fav straight from the UK, talking international tickets, soccer tickets, and much, much more. All right, Fav, man, you're like a legend in the ticketing in the UK soccer community. It's great to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Love the show, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, Sean, basically, I think you initially got me on to Fav, and I mean mainly the Discord group. Is that how you heard about I guess Fav's world and tickets?
Yeah,
and
I think I saw it originally on a Boogers post that somebody said that, there's a ticket Discord, so I joined, and I was really surprised at what I found, and that was that there is this huge population of international ticket collectors, which I had no awareness of, and so I always jump in there to kind of check out, see what everybody's talking about. A lot of it is stuff that I can't really relate to, and I don't know anything about, but it's often kind of an education. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, Fav, tell us about the Discord. I guess it's, titled Ticket Stand. I've been on there a little bit. I don't, comment too much on there, but it's a great source of info, especially for, soccer tickets and international tickets. But kind of talk to us about that Discord channel and how you got started and anything.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, it was the funny thing is I never wanted to set it up. So the Discord kind of was a secondary thing. So I suppose I began as a card collector, felt like, actually, in retrospect, having seen what a lot of people write on Boogers, is that they get priced out of one market and find tickets. And certainly with soccer, cards can be quite expensive, and I found tickets just be kind of that safe haven. And I think I just started sharing them in soccer groups and began to kind of get invited to sort of podcasts that were much more card oriented to begin with. And off the back of one of those, I think a guy that I was interviewed by basically said we should set up a ticket Discord, and I kind of looked a little bit bemused about the idea and sort of said, well, no one's going to want to join this. And lo and behold, he set it up, he created it, he transferred the ownership to me, and actually since then it kind of snowballed. So it was only months later that I kind of learned that there was this wider community in sort of Boogers. And I think if I'd known about Boogers in the first instance, I think that probably would have been the safe haven, but it came the other way round, and it was more because the community that I'd kind of been involved with historically was much more card collecting focused than ticket collecting focused. And that's basically how it came about.
It's fascinating to me because it seems like in a lot of different platforms you kind of run into the same people in ticket collecting, but in that one it's really a different crowd altogether, which is really interesting. It's great.
How many members do you have on that Discord?
So that's a good question. I think there are about 270. So it's not enormous compared to, say, Boogers, where you're talking about the thousands. And of that, I would say that the kind of activity is probably limited to probably the same sort of like 50 voices. But there's certainly a community there. And I would say that the focus is very much kind of soccer, F1. It's probably those niche sports that probably don't get much of a footprint in North America. And it's sort of come about pretty organically. I think it's kind of been, people have been forwarding it because someone might have a card group, and an individual within that card group has started to probe questions around tickets, and someone might have been invited as a result of that.
I lost his audio.
Oh, hey, we lost your audio. So if Fav's messing with that, we'll talk about that Discord channel. Basically it has a lot of the welcome, but it's broken up into ticket chats, collection show off, things that people are selling, social media, things they find on social media, all just kind of great things that you're looking for. You know, when you want to buy, sell, and trade, auction house chat kind of breaks it down. So if you're
If I
looking
take
for
my headphones off, can you hear me a bit
Yeah.
better?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
it's
can
back.
hear you now.
Okay, excellent. I hope there's no echo. That's the only thing that I was worried about. I usually wear those headphones, but it doesn't need to be to be that. So yeah, a lot of those channels have kind of grown kind of organically as and when there's been a need. It probably looks a lot tidier now than it used to. It used to be kind of very disparate. It probably began as kind of like a ticket chat, and I think we've gone through various iterations where it might have had American football chat and no one was talking in that channel, so we've deleted it.
Right.
It just so happens that a lot of the collectors within there kind of started their focus within soccer, and I've probably gotten to know them through other channels like Instagram or Discord, through card groups, and it's kind of collected together as a result of that, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a collective of people that have just kind of shared an interest in soccer tickets to begin with, and it's then kind of sprung out into other avenues such as kind of F1 or rugby or cricket or things like that. So yeah, I mean the channel layout is very much a kind of on a Discord, it's much more of a kind of moving target, and I've got to be honest with you, I'm a complete novice still. I still feel like I'm a complete novice when it comes to kind of Discord. I'm not tech savvy, but it seems to do the trick. There's probably a lot of duplication on some of these channels, but people tend to use them pretty well, I think. Yeah, that's it really in a nutshell.
And tell us about so obviously you're a monster soccer ticket collector. Kind of talk us about how you got into that and your journey. And you said you were in cards prior.
Yeah, so I think I'm about 35. So actually I'm not 35, I'm 37 thinking about it. So I'm doing myself a service. I'm kind of a bit older than I'm stating, but I'm around that age, and kind of have grown up with kind of Messi and Ronaldo sort of being my icons. Like a lot of people my age, they're two wonderful players, football players, but quite frankly, if you want to go out and kind of get a card of note, then you're having to fork out quite a significant amount of money. And for me, it was just I'm pretty tight actually. I don't like to spend money if I don't need to. So for me, it was quite the door with cards and stickers kind of shuts very quickly. With tickets, certainly at the time that I was kind of looking for tickets, there didn't seem to be a huge number of people looking for debuts or moments within the ticketing community, certainly for soccer. So
when did you start collecting tickets?
Probably only about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
Okay.
So relatively recently. It was a kind of pandemic pastime that kind of snowballed, really. And for me, that first hunt was for Cristiano Ronaldo's debut for Sporting Lisbon, and kind of that took me from kind of eBay through to the Portuguese equivalent of kind of eBay or Craigslist, and from there it would be a case of, well, what happens when you hit a dead end? Is there anything that you can do? And I think it was just a story of how, I suppose, every brick wall that I kind of met, I just wanted to find a way around it to get to the end goal, which was to get a ticket. And it probably took me about 3 or 4 weeks to hunt it down. But by that point, I think I was pretty addicted to that sort of chase.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of how it all began. It sort of just started as one thing. I thought, okay, let's see how difficult it becomes. And then when it just snowballed, to be honest. Once you've got Ronaldo's ticket, you try and get every other player's ticket as well. And some of them are very easy to find on eBay 3 years ago, because quite frankly, not many people were looking.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot more difficult, or the players in question are a lot more obscure. But yeah, certainly at the time it seemed to be a lot easier. Yeah.
Now, soccer, it's a little different than American sports, where they'll have, say, for instance, the Premier League. Well, you have the Premier League, the Champions League, then they'll maybe in the FA Cup, and then I guess there's other type tournaments where, say, the NBA has, they have preseason and regular season. Then they have a little thing called the Summer League that people really don't care about. with the explosion of debuts, what do soccer collectors really gravitate towards when, hey, I want to get this guy's debut? Which one is, how would you rank the importance of soccer debuts?
It's a really contentious question, I think. So I think especially kind of referencing the top 100 tickets, I think one of the things that has kind of caught I think the imagination of a few of the European collectors that I know is ticket number 100 on that list. So it's probably best framed with that example. So Lionel Messi, his ticket that is probably best known in the sphere of ticket collecting was a match that was a friendly. If you think about Lionel Messi's all-time statistics, it won't be counting towards those statistics. So, for me, it's kind of it's a friendly. It's not really his debut. So for me, the debut for a player like Lionel Messi will have been his first kind of his game number 1 on his all-time stats, and that game is a game that he played for Barcelona a season later against Espanyol, away at Espanyol.
Yeah.
So that ticket is significantly more rare. There was an example that went for sale, I think, at Goldin's maybe a month or two ago. And it went for a relatively kind of modest price, I think, actually. And perhaps kind of, I think because we've seen such a surge in those friendly debuts, people are kind of a bit worried about.
Yeah,
I think, exactly. You've spent a lot of money on the friendly. How do you know it's the right one? But actually, the Espanyol ticket kind of, for me, is the most important ticket in Messi's kind of arc of tickets. Now, one thing that I would say with soccer, and this is slightly, I think, perhaps different to a lot of North American sports, is that you do also have the international aspect. So, Messi, Argentinian, yes, of course, he kind of played for Barcelona for the vast majority of his career, but also, he played for Argentina. I'm lucky, kind of, I've got his Argentina debut here, actually.
Oh, nice.
So this is a full copy of that ticket, and actually I'm holding it upside down. There we go. It's the right way up. But it took place against Hungary, and he was sent off after, I think, less than a minute. So there's kind of quite an interesting story there. And obviously now that Messi's sort of won the World Cup, I think that sort of ticket probably holds a little bit more relevance in his kind of general arc of kind of tickets that are out there. So yeah, I think it's difficult, but I would say that for me, the most important tickets for an individual, if you're considering their debuts, would be their professional debut, and by professional I mean game number 1 on their all-time stats. So that's there, or their international debut.
Which one's more important? Depends on the scarcity.
Gosh, if you had to push me, I would say the domestic. So the one that you have in front of you there. That's the first game he's really played. So for me, that trumps everything.
Yeah, this one was so fascinating because at the time it seemed so rare, and then literally you're seeing like a dozen pop up every month or two on the auction houses, and I think I bought one from one of the guys for like $3,000, thinking, "Oh my gosh, this thing's insanely rare." I've only seen like 1 or 2, and then a month or 2 later, there's like dozens out. I was like, "Oh, I guess this one isn't." And I guess because the story is this was the opener for Porto, and everybody, I guess people, how do you think you would compare the international general, fan? Do they kind of collect their tickets? Does they not care? Is there a demand like, hey, we want hard tickets for games, but they're going away? Does the average fan look at a hard ticket?
I think there's a kind of combination of things. So, I think in the Messi kind of Porto game example, you've got an exceptionally kind of liquid ticket. There's just hundreds of examples out there. And I think a lot of people that I know will probably turn their nose up at that ticket. Now, I still think when it boils down to it, it's an incredibly kind of pertinent ticket in the arc of Messi's career. It's just, for me as a purist, I like to kind of go for the professional debut over anything else. So I think probably the kind of parallel is a bit like LeBron James. So with LeBron James, you've got the NBA debut, and my understanding would be that would be the one that you would gravitate to rather than the sort of pro debut or the kind of preseason type.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that that's true for just about any athlete. The actual league debut where the stats count is the but they always played in preseason, exhibition season. They had college, there's all of those too, and there is some interest for those, but it's not nearly on the level. And but going back to the top 100 and addressing that one in particular, it's important to, and this was what we had a lot of debate about, and it's hard to kind of define the criteria of what is iconic, and it isn't necessarily what's most valuable or even what's most desired. It's what is in kind of the consciousness of the collecting public, and this one to me is absolutely iconic. Even though I wouldn't want it, I don't really have a desire to get it. But and like you, I would rather the more scarce, harder to find ones. But it is iconic. I can't.
Yeah, I would say you would say it's instantly recognizable by a vast majority of people just for the sheer amount that are out there. It's just people
for better or worse. It's not necessarily a good thing that it's instantly recognizable, but it is.
I mean, the mad thing about this ticket is that I had the 3rd ever graded stub by PSA, and it was the highest graded at the time. It was a 6, and I would never have envisaged that there would be kind of where we're at now, which is kind of near 200, and that explosion has really happened within about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And that's just wild. Because even as a plentiful ticket, I don't think that there were many people that expected it to be that plentiful. I mean, even at Goldin's kind of a couple of months ago, you had this almost like toilet roll of proofs that comes up.
That's a good way to describe it.
Look at how plentiful this thing is. There's a whole toilet roll.
I felt like it was the perfect number 100 because it's kind of a ridiculous ticket. But it's Messi and it's a debut, so it still has that, importance.
Yeah,
it's just a very random ticket.
But moving on to the top 100, just like we discussed a little bit, Fav, I would love to see a non-US top 100. There's no, we're not hiding the fact that this list is absolutely US centric, North America centric. There's a few examples as we go through the list that will not be, but it is US centric. To have a list that was not that the one rule is that you cannot have a US based ticket on it, that would be an amazing education for somebody like me who knows hardly anything about any international ticket collecting.
I mean, it's a really interesting kind of I suppose, interesting posit to put out there. Like, what would an international top 100 look like? And quite frankly, at the moment, I don't think that we as a community are quite as kind of advanced probably as the North American collectors. So I would say that right now we're quite advanced with respect to soccer. Mm-hmm. I think it would be soccer dominant. And, I don't think that there would necessarily be a fair reflection of other sports. Now, I can tell you what I personally like from those sports and moments that I would be looking for, but you have to remember that kind of a lot of the collectors in Europe who have been submitting tickets to PSA have probably only been doing so for a couple of years. And my understanding is that, to the likes of Beckett or PSA or wherever you've been submitting them, it's still kind of, that's a drop in the ocean compared to kind of the North American collector who might have been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
So for me, I think at the moment, the problem really is how would we go about creating a top 100 when we probably don't even have a pool of 100 tickets to select from? I think that in some ways it would really look very, very similar to what the US list probably looks like. And that's, with the caveat that I think, we had this really interesting discussion earlier kind of on the Discord. So one of the tickets that I feel will probably feature on your top 100 is the Miracle on Ice ticket. And as someone that lived outside of the US, I'd never heard of the Miracle on Ice. And the idea of the Miracle on Ice, and I consider myself to be like an Olympic aficionado. You know, I feel like I know the Olympics, but I had not heard of the Miracle on Ice. And for me, that kind of taps at something quite interesting, that actually what the cultural touch points for an American are probably not the same as what the cultural touch points for a UK individual are. So, I mean, I've got a good example of a ticket here. So this is I don't know if you can quite see it. There we are. So I've got it upside down again. So this is David Beckham scoring from the halfway line, which is kind of almost the goal that announced him on the stage. He scored it in the Premier League on, I think, the opening day against Wimbledon. And it was kind of like in the last minute. And he, you know, about a week later, he was called up for England for the first time. To me, that kind of feels like the Miracle on Ice, but sort of for an English audience. Like people in England know that moment. But I would probably guess that you guys
never heard of it.
This is the really interesting thing for me, is that kind of, you know, for me, I don't know the Miracle on Ice, and I only have begun to appreciate it as a moment since I've become a ticket collector.
Yeah.
So I think there are moments like this that are emerging through the top 100.
And that speaks to my point about learning the education that I would get, because every time there would be something like that, I would be searching, Googling to learn more about it, because I would like it to be relevant to me.
Yeah, so. And you know, I did have to sense check this idea. So kind of, you know, I sense checked it against a bunch of other collectors in the Discord. Had you heard about the Miracle on Ice before you started collecting tickets? And 4 of the 5 people that responded kind of said, no, I hadn't. Which is kind of interesting. It's just really interesting.
One of the great sports stories of all time.
This is the thing, you know.
There's been movies made, multiple movies made of it.
Documentaries.
This is it. You know, there are people who are clearly kind of have grown up in North America who are like, of course I've heard of it. Of course you should have heard of it. But actually, for someone who kind of has you know, grown up in the UK, I know about things like the Black Power Salute, or I know that Jesse Owens kind of won 4 gold medals, but I don't know about the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, it was you know, a David versus Goliath type story against the Soviets during the height of the Cold War. I mean, it was very American centric story, obviously, and so it makes sense.
And you know, I mean, you know, we've been discussing this a little bit. So obviously, you know, the US had not sent a delegation to Moscow in 1980 for the Olympic Games. Whereas, you know, Great Britain had, like, Great Britain had kind of left it to their athletes to choose whether to go or not. And so I think kind of, you know, if there was a sense of vitriol kind of there between the USSR and USA, that was probably more accented, and why that ticket becomes more culturally relevant than, say, for people in Great Britain. So I just found that really fascinating. And I think what's really interesting, I think, about those kind of top 100s is to an extent you're going to find that wherever you do this exercise. Sergio, who you've had on your show before, for example, you know, said that if we were to do a top 50 set of soccer tickets, it would be dominated by Premier League moments. And he's absolutely right. You know, the vast majority of collectors that are on that Discord are probably still focused on Premier League moments. So,
what other I guess of all the American sports, what I guess would be most popular with collectors in, you know, in Europe?
So for me, it's probably those that have that world crossover. So the thing that I think, as a generalist collector, I understand better than any other sport, is probably boxing. So, you know, you've noted that kind of boxing is one of the ones that features quite heavily. Now, I think there's this general appreciation that, you know, because boxing is just fighting, it's very easy to understand.
Right.
So, you know, and it's not necessarily American. So whilst you have stars like Muhammad Ali or, you know, Floyd Mayweather Jr., we can all appreciate that to an extent. I think the only contrast that I might make is, what about someone like Lennox Lewis, who, you know, is the last undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, as in, you know, he's the last unavenged heavyweight champion of the world, he seems to me to get a disproportionately less kind of revered than, say, someone like Mike Tyson or Evander Holyfield, who he was around at the same time as.
Yeah, for sure.
So I find that really interesting. But again, I could kind of appreciate that is probably because of the dominance of kind of North American collectors in this space. And Tyson was a character. Maybe Lennox Lewis wasn't really a character.
That has a lot to do with it too. Yeah, the marketing, the self-promotion that they go through.
Crazy moments, crazy Tyson moments,
biting your ear off.
What sports are just like totally off the radar? What American leagues are just completely off the radar with the UK fan or collector?
Gosh, I feel really bad, kind of like speaking for every possible kind of European collector, but a good demonstration for me is sort of like the NFL. I know nothing about American football, and I can't speak for everyone because I know that there is a big fan base within Europe. Right. And that there are games that are played in Europe now, so whether it's Germany or in the UK. But for me, I had this quite interesting idea that maybe I should submit a Super Bowl ticket from, I think, is it 2003, and ask for kind of Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction to be the.
Some people do that. The halftime show, like the Prince was a famous halftime show, and
I mean, the wardrobe malfunction for Janet Jackson kind of, at that, that was global news for me. I couldn't tell you who won that game, but, I mean, I can tell you that happened. So, I mean, there are those moments that sort of captured the imagination. I would say that baseball and cricket sort of like quite similar in the, they're both sports with a bat, but very different if you kind of experience them. And gosh, ice hockey and basketball.
I would say, how's the NBA play over there? Does it get much traction?
I think with the right fans, it does. I think that there's a growing base of people who know it, and that really isn't something that I've experienced firsthand with tickets, but probably is with cards. So at card shows in the UK, you certainly see a lot of people sharing basketball cards. So there's certainly a base there. But it's not something that I personally collect. I kind of, I very rarely stray outside of the lanes that I know. So I kind of very focused and kind of very rarely will kind of go outside of that.
We got a couple questions. Fab, in your opinion, who is the most iconic athlete of all time internationally? Additionally, why do Europeans in general feel is the greatest all-time USA athlete? Wonder if it varies by location.
So,
tough question.
I'm a huge, and there's a huge amount of like recentism within this, but I'm a Usain Bolt mega fan. So this is a guy that unprecedentedly won 3 100 meters and 200 meters in the Olympics in a row. That's just never been done. I doubt it will ever be done ever again. I love the guy, and to tell you the truth, I just don't really understand why he doesn't get more credit globally, because he's a complete freak of nature, and he still holds the world records in the 4x100, the 200 meters, and the 100 meters. So for me, if you're thinking about pure discipline, and I think of like running as a really pure discipline because it is simply so easy to understand, Usain Bolt is the man for me. And, again, we're talking about an athlete who has probably run one of the most iconic races of all time when we're talking about the Beijing 100 meters. I mean, he's sauntering down the track, 60 meters down. He's kind of showboating, and then he wins this gold medal. And here I am talking to you about it. And I'm a little bit scared that it might not feature in this top 100 that you have.
It is kind of weird because Usain Bolt is, I mean, it was insanely popular when those races were going off and he was winning his Olympics. But you're kind of right, he doesn't kind of get the love that I feel like he should, because he had the personality, he had the talent, and he performed.
I think he is simultaneously the best thing and the worst thing to ever happen to athletics. So he's the best thing because he was just so far ahead of the rest of the field. And he's the worst thing because athletics has never recovered from him retiring. And that's my view on Usain Bolt, basically, is that right now we don't really focus on the 100 meters record, you know, at the next Olympics, because his record is just so much quicker than
he was a freak. What about U.S. athlete? Does any...
So US is much tougher. So again, oh gosh, it's just so difficult. I think I'd gravitate towards someone like Serena. So again, you know, tennis is probably something that as Brits, because Grand Slams are kind of played here as well. You know, I can kind of relate to that. And you know, just incomparable in the last 20 years. So for me, someone like Serena's probably the closest thing that I would appreciate from an international perspective. Now, again, like kind of, I don't really see many of her tickets kind of on the market, funnily enough. There's sort of nascent appreciation from her in trading cards, but yeah, I think Serena kind of has gone slightly under the radar. Maybe that's because she never quite hit the heights of kind of, was it Billie Jean King's record? I'm not sure whether she ever kind of...
I think she's considered the greatest of all time. I think, I guess, you know, it's just women's sports just don't get the play as much. For soccer, US wise, you know, I consider the women's World Cup victory probably the greatest American soccer event, and it's not even close. I don't even think there's a close second for US, but you know, since it's women's, collectors usually don't, you know, they shy away from.
I think you know, the sole women's football ticket that I have is from the semi-final between kind of the US and England, and it was given to me by one of the guys on the Discord who goes by kind of the Instagram handle Football Stubs. He's based in the US. He's a big collector of US women's football kind of memorabilia. And, you know, this game has kind of, I think, again, it riled people in the UK because, what's her name? Alex Morgan kind of, after scoring her equaliser, you know, did this kind of like tea sipping celebration. And I mean, I just think it's,
I remember,
you know, with football, this concept of shithousery kind of happens quite a lot, and I just think it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect as a moment. So I mean, you know, that's the sole example of a women's football ticket that I have, but simply because that celebration is just pure kind of, you know, adolescent sort of rage. It's fantastic.
I like that. What was the word? Shithousery.
Yeah. It's
new one for me.
You get that a lot in the UK. It's a term that's commonly used with soccer.
Yeah.
Well, what you know, being in the UK, you know, we have our outlets to find tickets, you know, eBay and the Booger Stubs and you know, local card shows. What about, you know, in your neck of the world? Do you guys have any unique international sites, or how do card shows, do they play out there with tickets?
Yeah, so card shows are still kind of very heavily dominated by kind of cards. I think I exhibited at a couple to kind of almost, you know, raise awareness of tickets, and kind of, you know, people just gravitate to kind of the Pokemon stands and the soccer stands and stuff like that. So I think it's still quite slow in the UK. I would say that the collecting techniques can kind of vary. So it might vary from, you know, contacting sellers on eBay through to, and I suppose this is one of the things where it might be quite different to the US, is that, so back to the example that I shared earlier, the Messi international debut, that was a game that took place in Hungary. So, you know, eBay doesn't have a footprint in Hungary. So you're kind of having to think outside the box as to how to kind of elicit the right response from an individual that might have attended that game. So, you know, you're kind of having to think outside the box as to how do you get in touch with a Hungarian? How do you speak to a Hungarian?
How do you?
Yeah, give us that info. Give us
it's heavily facilitated by kind of, you know, Google Translate, and it might be kind of, you know, one of the things that I found that I've had a relative degree of success with is also people who've tagged themselves in certain locations on like Facebook or or Instagram. So
Okay.
I reckon that happens quite a lot in the US anyway. But it might be things that had Cristiano Ronaldo's debut for Real Madrid, and that took place in Dublin of all places. And Dublin, it was a pre-season friendly. I got in touch with a guy that had tagged himself in a photo on Facebook years ago, and he responded, and kind of that's how he did the work. So
that is,
it's kind of
creative. Yeah.
I don't know how much of it is thinking outside the box, because kind of for soccer enthusiasts, I'm not sure that the box has really ever existed. So it's kind of what lengths do you kind of go to get some of these tickets? Yeah, I think I see some tickets that fellow collectors have kind of got, and I'm just like, how on earth have you managed to get that? I mean, earlier today I saw Michael Horn with the Jamaican bobsleigh ticket, and I was just like,
that guy Horn is a legend. We got to get.
How is he
trying to get him on, but he won't. We need him.
It's one of those tickets that you don't even know whether it exists.
Yeah. And that's one of the issues that we had with the top 100 is it a moment or is it a ticket? Because it's a list of tickets, not moments necessarily. And so that's a great example of a historic moment, so to speak. But the ticket, do they exist? Apparently,
Right,
Michael, find it.
99.9% of collectors have never seen it, so it's not in their mind when they're thinking about ranking. Is there any online like marketplace websites that I guess American collectors would know about?
So I not specific to tickets. I mean, for me, 90% of it's kind of eBay and
right.
eBay, and kind of you hope that someone's bought a lot and is listing them up ticket by ticket, or is lazy and might have it embedded within a lot. I would say that kind of Facebook groups do exist for kind of ticket collectors, specific kind of soccer ticket collectors. They're out there. More often than not, the problem that I've kind of found that I run into is that a lot of these individuals kind of want complete seasons, and it's very difficult for them to kind of break up that season. So if you're after a specific ticket from, say, Arsenal's invincible season, it's going to be very difficult for an individual to part with a specific ticket if it breaks that set.
Yeah.
I think Facebook groups tend to be quite good. I've not ventured into things like car boot sales and things like that. That's kind of, I don't know whether there might be joy there. Charity shops seem to not have anything like this. So I think it's predominantly cold contacting individuals who have attended games. Really, that seems to be my most kind of, I guess, plentiful method of getting some of the tickets that I want.
So Fav, what is your sense of ticket collecting outside of Europe and the US? Is there, like, in Asia and Australia, do you find interest in the Discord for in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, so I would kind of refer back to kind of the Olympics again, and what I would say is that for me, kind of the sort of the growing up around the Olympics, I think is something that we all do globally, but our kind of focus on it as individuals within a nation might be very different. So whilst yourselves might think, okay, the Miracle on Ice is the best thing since sliced bread, for someone like me it would be kind of like the most amazing thing might be, and this is a ticket that I have, which I think it's criminal actually. I think that this ticket hasn't been graded more. So this is Kathy Freeman's gold from Sydney in 2000. And so she became the first kind of Aborigine to win a gold medal. And she lit the Olympic flame. She was wearing that full body suit. It's an iconic moment. And yet I think that ticket is probably the only example that's ever been graded. So I think that there are kind of, when you scratch beneath the surface, when you kind of look outside of the obvious areas within, say, North American sports, there's probably quite a lot of depth that you might find in other areas. And the Olympics is a great example of that, because every country sort of has a different interpretation on it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of a global hobby, really. And kind of, very rarely, actually, the things that I'm kind of surrounded by right now, there's not very many of them that have taken place in the UK, certainly event-wise. I mean, I've got a few F1 tickets here. None of them have taken place in the UK. There's a few football tickets here. They haven't taken place in the UK, apart from the exceptional one that I've already shared. So yeah, I think really it's more a case of, for me, it's always been follow the sports person and what's the significant thing that the sports person is famous for, or what's the zeitgeist moment that people know about that individual, and then it's the case of chasing that down. Yeah.
Well, you've talked a little bit about getting tickets graded, and I know a few months back there was some frustration with soccer collectors because PSA, they sent a bunch of tickets out and they shipped them back, and there was no longer a soccer grader. Tell us what is happening now in the soccer grading world with PSA.
So yeah, I mean, I think, like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Like, I mean, a lot of people within the Discord were finding it quite frustrating. With, there was an individual that I know really well, Alexander, who had, I think, about a 45 ticket order returned without anything, examined, and that must have been really frustrating for him, kind of, especially as an individual that's spent probably close to $100 on FedEx costs and things like
probably
that.
Had to wait 3 months, something like that.
Exactly. So from my perspective, it was a period where individuals were contacting kind of Nat Turner on Instagram, and Nat's obviously really active on Instagram. I know that Sergio was also contacted. So Sergio, a former guest of yours, contacted kind of, I think, Ryan, president of PSA, and said kind of, what are you guys doing here? And for me, it was kind of a cold contact from a couple of a cold recommendation from a couple of the admins on Boogers. And so I kind of, I mean, I was quite apprehensive at the time. I just sort of said, look, I don't think I'm the best person for this. Someone like Sergio, he's got years and years of knowledge. I've kind of been doing this for a few years, and I've amassed a fair amount of knowledge, especially from kind of, what I grade and what I know. But I'm a relative novice at this. I do know probably more than just soccer, so maybe that's a string to my bow. But quite frankly, I've got a full-time job, and it's not necessarily something that I'm pining for. I'm not pining for extra work, get adequately remunerated by my day job. I've got a young family, and actually my priorities are slightly different. So, I mean, very politely said, here's my email address. And off of the back of that, it kind of transpired that sort of, had been recommended by a couple of other people, and the chief of staff got in touch and said, look, can we have a chat? And we had a chat, and I didn't hear back until the new year. And in the new year, kind of met the head of tickets and kind of said, well, look, we obviously have kind of a knowledge gap in this area. Would you kind of would you consider doing it? And I think I'd mulled it over with my wife and sort of said, well, look, how much spare time do I really have? I work a kind of full 36-hour kind of, I don't know whether 36 hours is a lot of time to work in the US. That's a week in the UK. But so I'd kind of gone back and said, well, look, I can probably spare a couple of hours every evening and maybe one day at the weekend. And look, that's my upper limit on kind of how much work I can do for you. I don't know whether that's more than you want, whether that's less than you want, but that's how much I can probably at a push do. Mm-hmm. Realistically, I can probably do that for 3 to 6 months. I don't know.
So what's the turnaround time look like now for soccer tickets?
Well, so I have seen individuals that have kind of submitted individual kind of submissions, and those have been kind of turned around to them relatively quickly after I've seen them. Now, what I can't account for is when they entered the system. If you appreciate kind of and you have to appreciate that I'm still kind of relatively at the periphery of what happens in kind of California, because I'm not in California. So, what I'm able to do remotely is still a fraction of the work that needs to be completed. I'm not holding the ticket. I'm not, doing any of the shipping. but my understanding is that a significant kind of like hold up in that process was designating whether the ticket was a full or a stub, which might be second nature to someone who knows North American sports inside out, but not necessarily for soccer, because those will vary from tournament to tournament, from team to team.
Right.
And secondly, like confirming the authenticity of the ticket. Now, again, I'm lucky that Discord exists, but I've learned an awful lot from it. So we've seen a lot of things kind of slip through the net, and that's the kind of nature of the beast I think that we deal with. We're dealing in assets that are probably readily reproduced, and certainly in the case of like World Cup tickets, they can be quite difficult to identify unless you know what you're looking for. So yeah, I think for me, it's been a case of kind of at the moment, those turnaround times can be variable because they depend on a lot of things, like kind of how long it takes to assemble the holder. But for a while, I over the last couple of weeks, I've been looking at a lot of World Cup tickets from 2022, the final. So those would have only been entered post December. So I'm hoping that it's kind of shortening on that front. I'd also add that kind of signed tickets are another kettle of fish, because obviously you have to go through that process of authenticating an autograph independently of authenticating the ticket. So there might well be an overlap in kind of how long that takes, because there's dual set of authentication that needs to take place. So yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I kind of got involved because a relatively active member of the soccer community within that Discord, and I just kind of wanted to help. Really, that's what it was for me. I just wanted to help my kind of fellow collectors who were getting frustrated by this situation, and thought, okay, well, someone's approached me here, and kind of just want to do my best.
Somebody's got to do it.
I mean, I've been saying, can someone kind of give me a break? Kind of hoping that other people on the Discord would volunteer themselves for this, for example, or would volunteer themselves to be moderators or own the server. But I mean, perhaps it's my benevolence that kind of means that I'm here and I'm kind of volunteering to do these sorts of things. It's I'm not doing it for the money or the kind of kudos of it. I have I consider myself a collector first and foremost. I mean, I'm surrounded by tickets. I'm not intending to sell any of them. And for me, it's kind of, just a pastime that I really enjoy, because my day job's pretty mundane, actually. And this is a really nice contrast from it.
Yeah. So what does the process look like when you get tickets? You just get scans of them and you have to...
So I'm getting high resolution scans, and I can consult on asking kind of individuals who are based in California to examine what that might look like or feel like in person. Mm-hmm. So it might also be a case of, I can't make a call, in which case I just say as much, because, reputationally it's much worse that I would authenticate a potentially incorrect ticket than a correct one. So, I mean, I kind of always got that risk averse hat on, if you like, before I'm making that call. Fortunately, I haven't seen too many, but there have been some interesting examples. So I saw a print at home ticket that was, clearly printed on graphic paper, and it sort of said Kodak Moments on the back. I mean, it's kind of absurdly fake. I mean, and I don't know whether people are being duped on eBay when they're buying these things, and that's what I would assume. People buy things thinking that they're the real thing. They submit it to PSA. Mm-hmm. Only when kind of someone turns around and sort of says, actually, that's probably not real. That kind of eureka moment occurs. So yeah, it's kind of I'm flying out there in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, again, couple of months back, if you told me that I'd be doing that, that would have seemed ridiculous.
Is that a regular trip that you're going to have to be making?
I don't know, actually. I'm kind of, one of these things where I'm kind of open to it, and as long as it's compatible with kind of my day-to-day job, I'm happy to sort of do the job. First and foremost, it's kind of, just so I can help out. I mean, it's just kind of, from my perspective, it's kind of like a goodwill thing. I was asked if I could help out, and yeah, maybe naively said yes, and
Might be
yeah,
a
it's
nice
kind of been
little adventure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it.
So how long have you been doing it for so far? Like starting?
Just since the turn of the year, so it's literally probably less than 2 months actually, because I started midway through January.
Do you feel like the workload is such that you could continue to do it?
Yeah, so I think initially I'd kind of envisaged it as a sort of 3 to 6 month gig, and truth be told, I feel like I could do it for longer. And I think I feel that because it's not as intensive on my time as I thought it would be initially. Now, I think it's always going to be a trade-off because I just have, a day. I've got a career, I've got a family. It's always going to be a trade-off between kind of, can I do it with my free time?
Yeah.
It's not the way I make my living. It's simply, something that I've kind of accidentally landed into doing, and, just kind of want to do my best on it.
Have you seen anything amazing come through? You don't have to be specific.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, we talk about Grails, and for me, the Grail is like the 1977 Diego Maradona debut for Argentina. It's a ticket that I personally have been hunting down for years, ever since I started kind of soccer ticket collecting. And I just can't find it. And I've seen an example of that, and I'm just like, it's moments like that that are kind of like,
it's always difficult.
This guy found it, and I'm still looking for it. It's just kind of, it's that Michael Horn situation. How has he got that ticket? How has he got the bobsleigh ticket?
I know a few people like that.
And it's, I think what's great about tickets is that there are a finite number out there, so you kind of have to enjoy it vicariously sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You kind of have to take joy in other people's collections a little bit,
right? And I think that's one of the greatest things about sharing it on Instagram and other formats, where with cards, yeah, I mean, you've seen them, everyone's seen all the important ones, but a lot of times you'll run into tickets that you've just never seen before, and it's just incredible, and you just have to stop and look, and it's an experience.
100%, and that's I think if you've got that. I kind of always feel that, like, kind of when someone else in the Discord kind of gets an amazing ticket, you kind of like, firstly, yes, there's a pang of I wish that I had
anger,
that,
jealousy,
anger, jealousy, all of those 7 stages of depression, right? And then you're like, you know what, I'm going to seriously enjoy this, and I get that so much more with tickets than I do with cards.
Right, absolutely.
That enjoyment is still shared, and I still love it for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
In the UK, can you still get hard tickets for events like with the Premier League?
So you can, but it tends to be as an away supporter. So even kind of lower league clubs nowadays are kind of moving everything digitally. So I'm a kind of fan of a kind of 3rd tier club called Wycombe Wanderers. We're kind of almost a little bit of a tiny team that no one's heard of. And even a club like that now is kind of paperless, and so the only physical tickets you tend to have will be for away supporters. And what we've seen actually quite recently, quite a lot of, is that soon after a game might take place, those tickets will kind of end up on the market. Mm-hmm. So recently, if you follow the Premier League, one of the things that's happened is Harry Kane broke the all-time record for goals scored for Spurs. It was a record that stood for decades, and immediately after the match you saw 3 or 4 tickets hit the market, perhaps in the same way that you did with the seat locators for LeBron James breaking the kind of Kareem record. It kind of they are out there, but they kind of disappear very quickly because they're up there for a week and then they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the nature of the game is very much changing. It's that everything is moving paperless, and it's harder and harder to get tickets from away fans who, by all accounts, if you've got a ticket as an away fan, you're usually going to be the most hardcore fans within football stadia.
Right.
So I also think it's very sport dependent. So I think within the UK, I would say that there are a lot of sports that where having a physical ticket carries a lot of prestige. So within that, I'm thinking F1. where the visibility of a paddock pass is kind of
Right.
almost like a status symbol, or a debenture holder at the golf, or at Wimbledon. Those things carry a lot of prestige, and so I think those sports will probably take a little bit longer before they go totally paperless. So yeah, I think there's a coexistence for a bit. Maybe it will get worse and worse and become more and more digital. But yeah, certainly we've noticed that there are less and less tickets for more and more.
I know, in the US, you can still kind of get them, like you say, home team fans can't. Do they have the ability in the UK where you say that, hey, I lost my phone, and go to the box office and they print you? Does that fly over there?
So I heard about someone doing this at the Arsenal stadium. I think this was someone on Boogers who'd said it works in the UK as well. I've never tried it. I think it probably would work.
Yeah.
I've never tried it. I like to think it would work. I like to think it would work.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more difficult here too, where some teams like the Yankees, they absolutely refuse. Well, I guess you can't go to the game then.
What they say, you have to go find a fan and see if you can borrow his phone.
Find some person and borrow their phone.
Go find a stranger and get his phone. The New York hospitality just comes right through. We got any tickets you want to show us? I'd love to hear about some monster events.
I mean, I was looking through my kind of like own collection earlier, and this kind of struck a kind of chord with me, and I think it's largely because I think am I right in thinking that perhaps a couple of you, if not all of you, is it a Jackie Robinson MLB debut? Is that
we both do, yeah.
So I mean, Jackie Robinson, trailblazer in terms of MLB baseball, and am I right in thinking that he was the first black kind of real figure in baseball?
Right.
Now, I'm a little bit wary of kind of giving this the same sort of kind of as a comparator because it's so recent, but. And he can be a bit of a divisive figure, but his record kind of speaks for itself. Lewis Hamilton is still the only ever black individual to line up on an F1 grid, and I just find it sort of fascinating as an individual. That even in the kind of nearly 15 years that he's been on the racetrack, there's never been another kind of person of color lining up alongside him. So I don't want to say Lewis Hamilton is like the Jackie Robinson of F1, but that comparison kind of came to me earlier. I mean, he's won 7 world championships. That's equally the highest that he's ever done. He should have won 8. That's that story for another time. And I think about F1 as perhaps a sport that's even more kind of emergent in the US. Now we've got several races there. So I mean, that's a really cool one for me. It's like a paddock.
Which one? Can you put it up close to the camera? And which one is that?
So this is a paddock pass from his debut.
So I've seen. I actually owned not the pass, but like the paper Ticketron type ticket. They call it like TickX. But I don't think I've ever seen one that's the actual nice looking paddock pass like that.
So what I love about this design is that design mirrors exactly what was on the program from the same event. And, again, it comes back to prestige. Actually, if you look at a pop report for Lewis Hamilton's F1 debut, you will in all likelihood probably see more passes being graded than physical ticket tech type stubs or full paper tickets. And I think you have to kind of step back from it and think about what a paddock pass really is. And a paddock pass allows you access to probably the most exclusive area of an F1 race, And so for me, this is just an incredible ticket, I think. And it might be that more materialized, but I love it. I think that's
would that get you into the event, or do you have to have something else to get in?
This would get you into the event. This has got kind of some sort of a microchip in it, so I think you kind of can tap with it.
So when you walk up to the stadium or the track, you would get in, then you would get even more access because you had that version of the...
Exactly. So, there are the various designs to kind of passes. So there are ones that are available for all events that take place, because obviously Formula One kind of, circuits all around the world. So there might be a pass that you have to all circuits within kind of the 2007 season, but this one's just specific for for his first F1 race, so his debut. So for me, I think it's kind of, sometimes we kind of overlook kind of what's right in front of us, and actually Lewis Hamilton's an incredibly interesting athlete. He's not kind of everyone's cup of tea, and I can kind of completely accept that, but I find that one really interesting. This is another one where Michael Horn has gazumped me. So this is Jimi Hendrix's last concert. So took place kind of, so it's a panel of 2 tickets. So it's a 3-day festival that took place, I think, on an island just off of Germany. And this final panel here, or the stub here, would have allowed access to the day on which kind of he played for the last time. He played a jamming session kind of in London a few months after that, but Michael, of course, has a pristine example of this with kind of,
of course he does.
I did get it first. So for me, I kind of like the fact that kind of,
Can you put that closer up on the?
Yeah, of course. So it's clearly.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really cool. Love
cool.
and peace, and like
so
cool design.
It's really unorthodox, but and I'm sure there are more out there, but I love that one. I know that I kind of I know, Mike, that we transacted on a Nirvana ticket a long time ago, and the Nirvana last concert ticket.
Right.
And I remember you saying on a previous show that whenever you exhibit at a show, it's that ticket that people gravitate to. Now, the only show that I have ever really exhibited at, everyone gravitated to this ticket, and this is the unveiling of the Nintendo 64 in a event called, I think, Shoshinkai in Japan. And I think what people love about this is everyone recognizes kind of, Mario and the Nintendo 64 logo. So, I had so many inquiries for it the day that I was exhibiting. Yeah, I think it's weird. I think it's just, again, it's that cultural touch point. People recognize Mario. They know who he is. And yeah,
that's why I feel like, sealed video games can sustain its popularity, because it just has that visual. When you see Mario Brothers or any other crazy old school game you played, I think that goes a long way. And something like that, like you said, people immediately like, oh, Mario, what is that? Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, I think there's a strong kind of recognition element to it, and also I think with the video game market, it's almost a little bit like contemporary art. So a lot of the kind of video game covers do kind of look like modern art in a way. I know you had Eric on your show kind of ages and ages ago, and it's really interesting to kind of see how devoted he is to tickets as well. But yeah, he's got an incredible collection of video games, doesn't he? So yeah. Just trying to think about what else I have here. Do you know what? So let's have a look at this one for a moment. This is Kylian Mbappe's professional debut. So he made his professional debut for AS Monaco. Monaco kind of obviously kind of like located in quite a rich part of France, or the Principality of Monaco. So I don't expect that they've got many fans who attend their games. As it turns out, this was a kind of midweek game. I managed to find that off of a guy that had attended the event on sort of Instagram, and it was kind of a fortuitous pickup.
Is that a pretty rare one? Do you see those at all?
So I think there were only about 4,000 people that attended the event.
Wow.
Man, that's nothing.
My understanding is that there's only about 5 graded. But if you're talking about kind of promising kind of bright young things in football, then Mbappe's right up there. I mean, he's probably, I think he's a wonderful player, and he's got probably another decade in him before he even considers retirement. He's already got a World Cup in the bank because he won the 2018 one. So, there's a lot of kind of he's just a really, really intelligent football player, and just a joy to watch.
Was that Monaco match? Was that was that a friendly, or was that his first professional?
This is a first professional game. So this is a game against kind of so Monaco play in Ligue 1, which is kind of the French equivalent to.
And they only draw 4,000 to.
Well, yeah. So I mean, it was the Stade Louis. It probably doesn't hold a huge amount of people.
Right.
Now, my understanding is that was one of the poorest attended games of that season. It was kind of midweek, middle of December, probably really cold.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you probably wouldn't have wanted to attend even if you had a ticket for it. And I suspect that's why, there's a couple of these out there that are in really good condition. So I think this is a PSA 6. I think the highest is a PSA 8. And yeah, no, I mean, I'm delighted to have it. And, it's one of those that I think popped up on Goldins a couple of months back as well and sold for a fair amount of money. Yeah, I mean, that's I've got to share this just because, again, this speaks a lot to, I think, the soccer enthusiast in me. So this is, I mean, there's a big idea, I think, generally in ticket collecting of that kind of debuts versus moments thing, and kind of,
right.
where do you fall on the spectrum? Everyone falls somewhere on the spectrum. I don't think I know anyone who solely collects debuts or solely collects moments. But this is arguably the most famous moment in the history of the Premier League, and this is when Manchester City won their first Premier League, which was kind of, I mean, it went down to the final game of the season, and it was a 93rd minute winner, in a 90-minute game that sealed the title. And, you tell people it's the Aguero moment, they will instantly know what moment this is.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, this is something that would feature in, say, a top 25 or top 50 tickets, soccer tickets kind of list. So those are probably like the highlights that I have kind of picked out.
Do you have we call it, this is another American thing, like the Mount Rushmore of tickets?
Yeah,
you ever heard that thing before? It's like the top.
yeah. No, do you know what we attempted on the Discord? We were in our relative infancy to do a 7 wonders of the ticket world, because there had been a kind of 7 wonders of the sticker world that had been an article that was really well received at PSA by, I think, Matt Hendler, who kind of led up their kind of soccer kind of area. And this had received a lot of traffic, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if kind of we could do one for soccer tickets? And the amount of kind of, I think in general dispute that it caused. I think,
it's like you can't make everybody happy. But is there like 2 or 3 or 4 that it's just like, oh, this is like kind of a consensus most people would put in their top 5 or 10? I mean, for me, I would bottom it out of these tickets for me. If you're talking kind of, I mean, the hand of God has to be there. The hand of God from Maradona, 1986. It's kind of a moment that transcends football. Really. Right. Talking about, it's culturally very important, I think, as everyone has heard of the hand of God, even if they don't know about soccer itself. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that has to be on there. I'm of the opinion that if you're to have another ticket in there that relates to, say, Pele, it has to be either the 1958 or the 1970 World Cup final. So that's quite a contrast from what we see in auctions, where the World Cup debut goes for a lot more. Right.
But I feel that debut is a bit of a kind of red herring, really. It's similar to the kind of Lionel Messi situation, where you have this friendly debut. It wasn't really his international debut. It's just kind of been aggregated by like the populace as sort of, something that's important. For me, I would take the 1970 World Cup final, personally, because Pele remains the only athlete to have ever won the World Cup 3 times. And that was when he achieved it. Then I think, Messi Espanyol debut. And finally, probably comes back to, a personal choice for me. It would be that 1977 Maradona debut for Argentina, the one that kind of I just can't get a hold of. It's a really interesting ticket, that one, because similarly to Michael Jordan's debut for the Bulls, you've got those variations where you've got a red variation, you've got a blue one, you've got the Ticketron kind of variant. Now, what I've seen for this 1977 ticket is that there are different colours, and I think that if you're an Argentina fan, you want the blue one. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that the market is mature enough to appreciate the differences there. But for me, I would pay more for a blue one than I would for, say, a green one.
Did I see one of those sell for like 20 or 30K a year or two ago? Was that right?
Yeah. That was one of those where it really went for a lot of money, and actually more recently it went for a lot less, so closer to about 4 or 5K. It remains a really difficult ticket to find. And yeah, it eludes me. I'm sure people will be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat, but yeah, I mean, I would absolutely, love to have that ticket.
You'll get it. You'll get it someday.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, that would be my Rushmore.
We have some questions. This was asked twice, so I'm gonna throw this up there. When presidents throw out first pitches in the United States for baseball, it's a big deal. I noticed Princess Diana attended a few soccer matches back in the early 90s. Any significance there?
Gosh, I would personally not say so. But I would say that the area of moments within, say, soccer matches are increasingly collectible. So there have been funny moments that have kind of happened where owners step out onto the pitch and rouse the crowd, through to individuals taking saying something out of place in a post-match interview. Those sorts of moments are really collectible, and I think I'm still on the kind of hunt for some of those. But personally, I mean, I haven't. I know the first pitch thing. I wish there was a parallel, actually, in a way, with soccer. I mean, one of the things that I heard about recently was Gareth Bale, who obviously played in the MLS. He retired and became a golfer. Now, I'd quite like to have the ticket from when he first played that sort of like, I think I can't quite remember, it was a pro-am type tournament.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think that's quite happened with, say, royalty quite yet.
I know Sean has quite a few Michael Jordan baseball. Don't you click?
Yeah.
Michael Jordan baseball,
yeah.
Baseball
I find that interesting. It's it's the same thing with when an athlete tries out a different sport. I think that it's interesting to look at those.
Yeah, I don't think I brought it along, but I have. So again, going back to my Usain Bolt sort of fanboyism, one of the tickets that I do have is, and what's really well known if you're a biographer of Bolt, is that he always wanted to be a footballer, and after he retired from kind of running, he was offered a contract by a Australian side called Central Coast Mariners. So I have the ticket in which he made his debut, signed by Bolt, which is an amazing quirk. I mean, it's probably not very valuable, but it's a similar sort of situation to the kind of Michael Jordan thing.
I feel like the American collecting community really likes the quirky tickets like that. We have things like Ferris Bueller's Day Off ticket, and
I mean,
things like that. People really.
We also have a couple pretty loud social media influencers that really hype that kind of stuff too.
I mean, for me, like Ferris Bueller is a really interesting one, because I've been thinking about kind of what are the obvious parallels within the UK collecting community for a ticket that resembles an event that perhaps took place on film or on media. So I don't know how familiar you are with the director Danny Boyle. So he won the Oscar for Best Director in, I think, 2009 for Slumdog Millionaire. But one of his earliest films is a film called Trainspotting, and it stars Ewan McGregor. And there's a really well-known kind of sex scene that takes place within Ewan McGregor. with Ewan McGregor in it, and in the background there is a really prominent scene where a goal takes place by the footballer Archie Gemmill as Ewan McGregor climaxes, and then he says something like, "I haven't felt that good since Archie Gemmill scored against Holland in 1978." And I've been looking for this ticket because I think that it's quite similar to the Ferris Bueller situation.
Right.
But it's quite a hard ticket to find because it took place in the middle of nowhere. But I think it's a really interesting kind of parallel in a way.
Yeah.
Darren Ravello.
Yeah, and there's lots of those. There's lots of those that kind of, you know, interact with a movie, a famous movie or something like that. But that's a great example. And I think Ferris Bueller, because of Darren Ravello, has gotten way more hype than it deserves. But it is what it is, you know, that it has become quite popular as a result.
I mean, for me, Trainspotting, like Danny Boyle's Trainspotting, has a fantastic moment where, you know, a similar situation could happen with soccer tickets. But yeah, I mean, I've sought down that ticket, and I really want to find it and kind of submit it with that sort of caption. You know, I haven't felt that good since Archie
I think that's what makes like collecting great, because people are into like random things that they get immense appreciation for, and other people are like, "Oh, what, really? Like, you want to collect that?"
But it creates a story. It's
fun.
Tell a story based on it, and that's kind of what the fun of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Here's another question. I have no idea about this game. Fab, you have a Watford versus.
So this is I think this is a game in which kind of a Leicester player kind of is in kind of injury time, and this is a playoff game, and the winner of this game goes through to the playoff final, and the winner of that playoff final kind of will get promoted to the Premier League. Now, it's an incredible, like, kind of, you should try and find it on YouTube, but basically what happens is that a player for Leicester gets a penalty, and Watford fans are just kind of disconsolate. They've lost the game. This is in the last minutes. If the guy scores the penalty, they're going out. It's an all or nothing type moment. Now the goalie saves it. He then fires the ball down the other end, and a player called Troy Deeney, who's kind of a Watford legend, scores, and the crowd just goes absolutely mental, you know. And there are tickets out there. I don't have it. I think it's a fantastic one to try and find. You know, it's out there.
I feel like I need to YouTube this now.
It's a fantastic moment.
That's what I love about, you know, like, I don't know if all leagues are like that, where you get relegated, and that's the problem with American sports is, you know, they have a playoff and that dictates the champion. So all these teams will sit their players during the regular season, especially in the NBA. And if you are terrible, you get rewarded. You get the number one pick, you know, but in soccer, if you're terrible, your ass gets relegated and you're basically going hell for a year or two, or it's not longer.
Yeah, do you know what? It's a good system. You kind of have to accept that it has its limitations too. So I speak as someone that kind of, you know, is this Wycombe Wanderers fan, a team that's existed for, you know, over 100 years and never endangered, apart from one season, a couple of seasons ago, getting to the second tier of English football. And so I think there is kind of, you know, there are levels to this even within that. So it's kind of, you know, you have your upper echelons like the Man Cities and the Chelseas and, you know, whoever else in the top leagues, and arguably it's still going to be really difficult to ever compete at that level. So yeah, I think you know, it's interesting. Kind of, I like the way that it is all in a pyramid, but certainly I think people have been seeing in seasons gone by that pyramid is getting ever harder and harder to climb up. Actually,
yeah. But theoretically, it could be done.
Theoretically, it could be done. And, you know, there are great computer games in which you can kind of take. So there's a great game called Football Manager where you can take a team from, you know, the 10th division all the way up to Champions League glory, and, you know, you can win the World Cup with San Marino or something like that. And I mean, you know, I think that captures the imagination a little bit. It's possible. Yeah, even if it in reality isn't very possible. So
yeah.
Sean, I know, did you have any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. I'd just like to say thank you, Fa, for coming on. And if it does come to pass that you do want to do a top whatever list, Europe, soccer, international, I'd be happy to help and in any way that I can.
Thank you, Sean. I've been trying to stave it off for this long, so hopefully I won't get any more pleas from the Discord for the immediate short term. But maybe we'll revisit it again when you've done your top 100.
Hey, before we go, I want to see it. Tell me, I found the video. I need to watch it.
Yeah. Go for it. So this is Anthony Knockaert, who plays for Leicester.
I'm not getting any video.
Unbelievable! Almunia keeps Watford in it. Alanya breaks downfield and finds Forestieri. Forestieri right into the area, gets to cross him. Hawk is there, heads it down. Dean is unbelievable! There's a pitch invasion to Wembley! Would you believe?
That got him back in the Premier League, basically? Is that what happened?
Well, so I think actually the funny thing about that is not straight to the Premier League, but that would have been the access to the playoff final, and the winner of that would have gone to the Premier League. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was very much, it was a season-ending moment for whoever lost that game, and actually, you know, it's really a kind of clutching defeat from the jaws of victory moment for Leicester, who, you know, should have scored the penalty and gone through to the final. So yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I appreciate it. I thought that was a lot of great information. You know, us being US, not into the whole international soccer market. You see a lot of these tickets and you just like, well, it's not really our world, but now you kind of bring some more clarity to things we see and why things are worth more than others, and what people gravitate towards. But yeah, man, it's great having you on.
Thank you. A complete pleasure to be on. Thanks for the invite again. And keep doing what you're doing. Love sort of tuning into the show, and watch the top 100 tickets populate itself with eager interest. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to
hopefully you won't be disappointed.
Right? Maybe in the future, in 5 or 10 years, we'll do another and we'll get some more more soccer stuff in there.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.